Welcome to the Alternative Crops module in our Transitioning to Organic series.
This module was authored by Adria Fernandez, Christine Moncada, Constance Carlson, and Craig Schaefer, published in 2017 and updated in 2026. Narrated by Constance Carlson, with additional narration generated using the AI voice of Hannah from ElevenLabs.
For the purposes of this module, we can define alternative crops as any crop that is not one of Minnesota's major crops. 74% of agricultural land in the state is devoted to corn, soybean, hay, and wheat. Many other crops are grown, but no other crop claims even 1% of the state's total acreage. For this module, we will consider any crop other than corn, soy, hay, and wheat to be alternative crops. These crops represent important opportunities to add diversity to your organic rotation. In this module, we are going to explore less common alternative crops that may be suitable for organic systems in Minnesota and surrounding regions. First, we'll discuss the potential roles of alternative crops in your rotation, including some reasons to consider alternative crops and some general considerations for their use. Then, we'll look at several categories of alternative crops and how to grow them, including grain legumes, processing crops, alternative small grains, and other grains. First, let's look at why you might want to consider including alternative crops in your rotations. Diverse rotations have many economic and ecological advantages over shorter, less diverse rotations. Expanding rotations beyond the major crops can discourage pest and disease buildup by varying the timing and types of disturbance and plant hosts present. Diverse crop rotations can make more efficient use of soil, water, and sunlight resources. They can also improve soil health, including protecting from erosion and nutrient leaching, and promoting a diverse and active soil microbial community.
Here we show some young field pea plants being grown organically in a field.
Diverse rotations may be helpful to you as a farm manager by distributing management and labor needs across the season. Alternative crops can also give you an entry into diverse and potentially lucrative markets. All of these benefits are explored more fully in the Rotations module in this series. There are several steps to take as you prepare to incorporate alternative crops into your rotation. You'll need to begin by exploring markets for these crops, as well as planning for the management they will need and taking steps to reduce the expenses and potential losses associated with them. We'll discuss each of these in a little more detail. In general, when growing less common crops, you should expect to put more time and effort into marketing your products. Your best bet, if at all possible, is to seek out growers in your area who have experience with the crops you are considering and learn from their experiences. Definitely don't just plant a crop assuming you can sell it later. Do the marketing legwork first. You can find more details on how to approach marketing of alternative crops in the Marketing and Economics of New Crops modules in this series. Managing additional diversity in your rotation requires some planning. You'll want to make a schedule of the different field operations that will be needed during the season. Consider the equipment that will be needed for each operation, so you have plenty of time to find a source for any specialized equipment that you may need to buy, borrow, or hire. And be aware, when planning your operations, of crop-specific quality standards that may require special handling, transportation, or storage. There are several steps you can take to mitigate the risks involved in making the leap to less common crops. Try starting with a test plot to see how a crop works on your farm before making a bigger investment. In some cases, Grants may be available from Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, also known as SARE, state agencies, or other organizations for farmers who want to add infrastructure or experiment with new crop enterprises. Insurance options for diversified operations are not always straightforward. Getting adequate insurance coverage can be difficult for organic crops that do not have a well-established history on your farm or in your region. Nonetheless, you may want to look into whether the USDA's Risk Management Agency's Whole Farm Revenue Protection Program could be advantageous to your farm. In this section of our module, we will discuss specific alternative crops that you may want to consider. We will cover 4 main categories of crops: grain legumes, processing crops, alternative small grains, and other grains.
Flax, an example of an alternative crop, is shown here with its distinctive blue flowers growing in a field.
One potentially valuable category of crops is grain legumes. These include dry pea and field bean, also called dry bean.
This slide displays 2 photographs of grain legume plants. On the left, there is an image of a dry pea plant, characterized by green stems with white flowers and several green pea pods. On the right, there is an image of a field bean plant, featuring broad green leaves.
Dry pea is an early planted, cool season legume crop. Generally, peas in Minnesota can be harvested in July, leaving the remainder of the season open for cover or winter crop planting. Peas can be particularly beneficial in your rotations because their biomass can contribute to soil nitrogen stocks if the peas are well nodulated with appropriate rhizobium strains. Field peas come in a variety of colors and are used as both food and livestock feed. Only the green and yellow seed colors are used for food, while any color may be used for feed.
Shown on this slide are the seeds of both the yellow and green types of dry peas.
Dry peas should be planted as early as possible and not after May 15th. Breeding work is underway on fall-planted, winter-hardy field peas, but none of the currently available winter varieties are reliably hardy in Minnesota. Seed should be inoculated with an appropriate strain of rhizobium bacteria to ensure that the peas will nodulate and fix nitrogen. The seedlings can survive some frost after emergence. However, the plant is sensitive to excess heat and moisture during flowering, which can damage yields. Weeds can be controlled with pre-emergence or early post-emergence tine weeding. Dry pea is harvested either by direct combining or by swathing followed by combining. Pea varieties may be either vining, also called leafy, or semi-leafless. For Minnesota environments, the determinate semi-leafless varieties are preferable to the indeterminate vining types because they will have more uniform seed maturity at harvest. There are many pea varieties that are resistant to one or more of the diseases that peas are susceptible to.
Shown are semi-leafless peas with white flowers in an organic field.
There are some challenges involved in harvesting peas. Their prostrate growth habit and tendency to lodge can make them difficult to pick up with the combine, and the pods are also prone to shattering. Another alternative grain legume to consider is field bean, also known as dry bean or dry edible bean. These come in a wide range of market classes. Common ones include black, pinto, navy, and great northern.
Displayed in this image are several field bean varieties of different colors and sizes.
Organic field beans should be planted late May to early June in Minnesota. Weeds can be controlled with cultivation before flowering, but once the beans flower, they are susceptible to damage from cultivation. Field beans are harvested by direct combining or by windrowing, followed by combining. Appropriate equipment and settings are crucial, as damage to the seed coat during harvest will lead to steep price discounts. Research at the University of Minnesota suggests that the least risky market classes of dry bean for Minnesota organic growers are black, pinto, and navy. Larger sized beans such as kidney and cranberry beans may be lower in profitability due to reduced yields, and so may be higher in risk, especially for less experienced growers.
On this slide, we show examples of cranberry, black, kidney, red, navy, and pinto beans with their variety of colors and sizes.
Disease resistance is another important consideration when selecting varieties. Especially in humid or poorly drained conditions, beans are vulnerable to a range of diseases including rust, anthracnose, mosaic virus, root rots, and bacterial blights. You will want to choose cultivars resistant to the pathogens most problematic on your farm and in your area.
Shown is a close-up of a field bean plant with the yellow and brown leaf spots indicative of common bacterial blight infection.
Even with genetically resistant varieties, disease is a major constraint on dry bean production in Minnesota. To minimize the impact of diseases, bean residues should be buried rather than left on the soil surface after harvest, and the frequency of beans in rotation should be kept low to prevent the buildup of pathogens. You can also reduce bean losses to disease by sourcing only high-quality, disease-free seed.
A tractor and plow are shown plowing under crop residue in a field.
Another type of alternative crop to consider is processing crops. This category of crops are harvested while seed is still immature and used for freezing or canning. Processing crops in Minnesota include peas, snap beans, also known as green beans, and sweet corn. These crops are generally grown under contract with a particular broker or processor. The availability of these contracts may be geographically limited, but there are opportunities in southern Minnesota, which is a major center of processing crop production. The processor generally harvests and transports the crop, and will schedule your planting and harvest times to meet their needs and capacity. Processing pea is sometimes called green pea or canning pea. It is the immature seed of the pea plant. Southern Minnesota is the largest center of processing pea production in the nation. However, only a small portion of this crop is organic.
On this slide, we have a picture of green peas that have been shelled into a colander.
Processing pea can be planted from late March through early May, though yields will be highest when it is planted early. Seed should be inoculated with appropriate rhizobium strains. Weed control in processing pea is similar to field pea, as described earlier. Processing peas are harvested using a specialized combine that shells the peas in the field. Variety selection in processing pea will depend on their intended end use. Varieties may be different for canning versus freezing. Other variety selection considerations are similar to those in dry pea, particularly disease resistance. As with dry pea, semi-leafless varieties are generally preferable to vining types for Minnesota environments.
We show an example of a semi-leafless pea variety with many tendrils and a vining pea variety with longer vines and fewer tendrils.
Considerations for growing green pea are similar to those of dry pea. In particular, its prostrate growth habit can complicate weed control and harvest, and its biomass can contribute to soil nitrogen if the plants are well nodulated. Sweet corn is another crop to consider. It can be grown for fresh market, meaning that it is sold as whole ears or corn on the cob, or for processing, meaning that it can be canned or frozen. Various genetic types of sweet corn have been developed. Normal sugary varieties are standard for processing. Super sweet and sugary enhanced types are preferred for fresh market.
The abbreviation for normal sugary is SU, for super sweet it is SH2, and for sugary enhanced it is SE.
Sweet corn should be planted when soil temperatures are appropriate. That means between 55 and 60 degrees for normal sugary and sugary enhanced varieties, and over 60 degrees for super sweet. Weed control options in sweet corn include cultivation, flame weeding, and cover crop mulches. Sweet corn is harvested using specialized machinery. Whole ears and husks are transported to processing facilities. Sweet corn varieties in the market include white, yellow, and bicolor kernel colors. Yellow corn is generally desired for processing uses. Universities in several states conduct and publish sweet corn variety trials, although most are conducted in conventional systems. When choosing sweet corn varieties, bear in mind that there are GMO varieties on the market, which are not suitable for organic production. Because corn pollen is windborne and can travel from field to field, sweet corn crops have to be protected from cross-pollination by other corn varieties on your farm or neighboring farms. Organic corn can be contaminated by pollen from neighboring plantings of GMO varieties, and sweet corn can also be cross-pollinated by field corn or popcorn, resulting in some starchy kernels, or by sweet corn of a different color, producing off-color kernels. A separation of 660 feet is generally considered sufficient to prevent most corn cross-pollination, or a difference in pollination date of at least 1 week, preferably 3 to 4 weeks. The Preventing GMO Contamination module in this series has more information on protecting organic corn. Another major processing crop in Minnesota is snap bean, also known as French bean or haricot bean. These are common bean varieties that have been selected for their edible immature pods. Processors of snap beans will have tight specifications for pod and seed characteristics, which may differ for canning versus freezing use. Plantings of snap bean should not immediately precede or follow soybean, dry bean, or other legumes in your rotation in order to prevent the buildup of pathogens. Weed control options for snap bean include stale seedbed, tine or flame weeding, and inter-row cultivation. The beans are harvested using specialized mechanical pickers. In choosing snap bean varieties, you will want to look for resistance to root rot and other pathogens, which can present the same challenge to snap bean production that we discussed for dry bean. For organic systems, you will also want to choose fast canopying bush-type snap beans to maximize the crop's ability to compete with and suppress weeds.
Displayed here are the brown infected roots of a diseased bean plant.
There are unique considerations involved in growing processing crops. Contracts with processors will dictate varieties planted, timing of operations, and other practices. Quality standards are highly specific and very exacting, and the window for harvest and transport is very short. You should be sure to know what the terms of your contract specify in case of production or harvest difficulties or quality issues. Another category of alternative crops from Minnesota Organic Systems is the alternative small grains. Alternative small grains from Minnesota range from the more familiar oat, barley, and cereal rye to emerging specialty grains such as specialty wheat varieties including einkorn, emmer, and spelt, and triticale, a rye and wheat hybrid.
The photograph shows a close-up of numerous elongated, light brown triticale grains scattered against a black background.
Small grains can be divided into spring-planted, winter-planted, and types. Spring-planted small grains include oat, barley, spring wheats, spring rye, and spring triticale. The fall-planted types include winter wheat and spelt, winter rye, and winter triticale. There are growing markets for specialty and so-called ancient grains, as processors incorporate these grains into new products for health-oriented consumers. Each of these crops will have its own unique moisture, nutrient, and management needs. You can find more complete information on growing and marketing small grains in the Small Grains module in this series. There are several other grain crops that may be suitable alternatives for some organic systems in Minnesota. These other grains include buckwheat, millet, sorghum, sunflower, and flax.
4 pictures show close-ups of black triangular buckwheat seeds, round orangish-brown sorghum seeds, narrow black sunflower seeds, and golden teardrop-shaped flax seed.
Buckwheat is a fast-growing annual that can be harvested for grain or tilled down for green manure. It is valued for its ability to rapidly produce a large amount of readily decomposable biomass, making it a valuable green manure for adding organic matter to soils. This rapid growth also makes it a useful smother crop for weed control. It's a great rotation crop since its growth period is very short, only about 10 to 12 weeks, allowing a wide range of potential planting and harvesting times.
The image shows a close-up of many small buckwheat seedlings growing in rows in a field.
Buckwheat grain yield will be highest if it is planted early, as soon as the danger of frost has passed. Weeds in buckwheat can be minimized with pre-planting tillage. Buckwheat canopies quickly and can exclude weeds quite effectively. Buckwheat is very sensitive to frost. If you're harvesting before a frost, you'll want to swath it before combining. The grain can be direct combined if the crop has already been frost-killed. One thing to note in growing buckwheat is that the crop requires adequate phosphorus and will not thrive in phosphorus-deficient soils. Although buckwheat is highly beneficial in crop rotations, markets for buckwheat grain are small and may be difficult to access. It is not recommended to plant buckwheat following small grains or flax, as volunteer seed of these crops is difficult to clean from buckwheat grain. Sorghum is a relative of corn, also known as milo. Sorghum grain is generally used in the U.S. as a livestock feed and is also a food grain, although it is not widely consumed in this country. Sorghum thrives in hot weather and suffers from few disease or insect problems. Sorghum should be planted in mid-May to early June when soil temperatures have reached 60 to 65 degrees. Sorghum performs best in warm temperatures and, like millet, maturity dates vary. Some varieties will not mature in Minnesota growing seasons, so be sure to choose varieties with suitable maturities. Sorghum's fertility requirements are similar to those of corn. It is considered a heavy feeder. Weeds in sorghum can be minimized with a stale seedbed, and the crop can be cultivated until it reaches 6 inches tall. Sorghum is harvested by combining.
This photo shows a field of sorghum plants with brown seed heads and green foliage stretching into the distance.
Sunflowers are a crop that can make a striking addition to your farm. The major market types of sunflower are oilseed and confectionery. Most commercial sunflower varieties are hybrids. Some varieties require insect pollination for good seed set.
Here we show a field with many yellow sunflowers all facing the same direction.
Sunflowers should be planted when soil temperatures are above 50 degrees to ensure uniform emergence. Weeds can be controlled using pre-plant and pre-emergence harrowing and inter-row cultivation after emergence. The critical period for weed control in sunflower is the first 4 weeks, after which newly emerged weeds have little ability to damage the crop. Sunflowers are harvested by combining, using a sunflower head attachment and a seed pan to catch shattering seed. One thing to note with sunflower is that bird and insect predation can be significant issues. It is sometimes possible to reduce bird predation by using fright methods such as aluminum strips or owl decoys. Another less common crop option is flax. Flax is a cool season annual crop that is used as an oilseed and sold as a health food product. Generally, golden seeded varieties are grown for food use, while brown seeded varieties are used for oil. For best yield, flax in Minnesota should be planted in late April to early May, around the same time as oats. Its fertility requirements are relatively modest, similar to small grains. Weed control is a major challenge in flax. The seed bed should be cultivated 2 or more times before planting, and you may want to consider underseeding the crop with clover or another forage to smother weeds. Flax is generally windrowed and allowed to dry before being combined. Flax can be quite a difficult crop to grow. It is very sensitive to adverse conditions, including poor drainage, excess moisture, and drought. It is also extremely vulnerable to weed competition, so it is very important to plant it in a weed-free seed bed in a field with relatively low weed pressure. Alternative crops can be particularly challenging to those newly transitioning to organic. Market access is a major challenge, and again, you should not plant a crop unless you know how you will sell it. Many less common crops are susceptible to weed competition and can easily be completely overtaken if weed pressure is strong. Some of these crops are vulnerable to weather, particularly to high temperatures or excessive or deficient moisture at critical flowering times. However, there could be strong consumer demand for these products and few certified organic growers producing them. If you are able to successfully grow these crops and connect with buyers, they may be quite high value. They can also help you build a rotation that best suits your farm, including options for soil protection, for optimizing labor schedules, and for low fertility or drought conditions. When planting a new crop, it's a good idea to start with a small-scale experiment. Rather than making a large investment, consider planting a small test plot. That way, if you have to plow down a crop that is overrun with weeds, or the grain is not of a marketable quality, you won't be facing a major loss. It's very important to get input from growers who have first-hand experience with these crops, even if it means seeking out farmers from outside your region. This can give you a better sense of the potential and the pitfalls of the crop you are considering, and save you from making preventable mistakes. Finally, if you choose to experiment with potentially high-value, high-risk crops, it's worth choosing good land for your test plots. It may be tempting to use a spot where your usual crops don't do well anyway, but many of these crops are very susceptible to weed pressure and excessive moisture. If you try them out on well-drained ground with lower weed pressure, you can get a more accurate idea of the potential productivity and quality of these grains, so that you can decide whether it's worth experimenting more with them.
The image on this slide shows grain amaranth plants being overwhelmed with foxtails and other weeds.
And we encourage you to refer to other modules in this series that may be helpful, including marketing, small grains, economics of new crops, rotations, and preventing GMO contamination.
This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, Organic Transitions Program under Award Number 2013-5, 1106-2-1005. This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Marketing Service, National Organic Program under the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, TOPP, in the Midwest region. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this publication are those of the authors and should not be construed to represent any official USDA or U.S. government determination or policy. The University of Minnesota shall provide equal access to and opportunity in its programs, facilities, and employment without regard to race, color, creed, religion, national origin, gender, age, marital status, familial status, disability, public assistance status, membership or activity in a local commission created for the purpose of dealing with discrimination, veteran status, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. For more information about this project, please see organicag.umn.edu, copyright 2026, Regents of the University of Minnesota. All rights reserved.